lrbaquatics.com. Here's a little prelude before we start the video. I actually shot a live fish room tour of Chuck Bremer's when I was at his house, but it didn't turn out so well. It didn't turn out well at all. So I had to delete it. It was just horrible with the audio and video. It was that bad. You couldn't really tell anything. It was indistinguishable of what you were hearing from them and stuff like that. So I went ahead, after we did that first part, went ahead and kicked it off and said, okay, let's go ahead and just shoot this. Maybe one day I'll get the computer to actually do the 4K fish room video for everybody. So I do have a second part saved up. So awesome, lots of great information, lots of cool fish, lots of cool stuff going on. So if you guys love fish, love aquatics, you're gonna love this video. And maybe the good thing about not getting the first part is hopefully I'll be honored again to go over to Chuck's and film the rest of it and do like a full tour, since I go over to St. Louis time to time, and he's over there. But he knows a lot, he's done a lot, he's awesome dude, real cool guy. So anyways, let's go ahead and roll this footage and get to it. Hello world, how's it going? So we're on part 2 of Chuck Bremer's fish room tour here, and yeah, without any further ado, let's get to it.
As we talked before, I like community tanks. I also have a lot of live bears, and I grew up on the farm. So one of the main things on the farm, of course, are the plants that you grow, either to feed the livestock or even for human consumption or whatever. So a main part of my communities has always been the extremely planted tanks that I've got. And if you look around, I've got a lot of tanks. I've done a lot of things to them to make them grow plants very well. Some of these have got dirt in the bottom, and so and then they're covered with gravel, small pea gravel, or a little smaller than finer than pea gravel on top. So these plants are rooted in that. The other thing is, I used to when I started the fish room, I had primarily T8 and maybe some T5 fluorescent lights. But they produce a lot of heat. They also use a relatively high amount of energy. And in the last couple of years, the LEDs have developed to the point where I can now get more light out of the LEDs, particularly for about half the energy that I could out of even T8s.
Yeah.
So I cut my power bill, and actually my plants have jumped because they're growing about twice as fast as they were before with the fluorescent lights.
Nice.
Most people don't realize that fluorescent lights, they're bright when you put them up, but about 6 months later, they're down to about 75%.
They lose their punch.
Yeah.
Just to give you guys an idea of the section and area we are in too. This is part of it. This is the area we're covering in the second part. First part, we already seen all these tanks over on this side. As you can see, they're just all over the place. We got tanks out here. He does summer tubbing out here. He gives presentations over here, more tanks back there, all kinds of great fish stuff. And fish up here. Very cool. And these bristlenose in here, oh my goodness, the bristles on them.
Those are some more poke palpas. Here's a nice one up in the corner.
Yeah.
And you can see he's almost 5 inches long or so. He's not quite as big as he'll get.
Those bristles are amazing.
The females will be 3 to 4 inches. Most they can get to be a little bigger, but generally they're not as big. And I used to think that the bristlenose, the female would go into the tube, lay the eggs, and then the male would come in afterwards and fertilize them. But the other day I was watching them, and the female went into the tube, and the male actually turned around and backed in. Which normally he sits there with his tail out. In other words, he goes in head first. But to fertilize the eggs, he actually backed in to fertilize those eggs. And then he came out and reset. It could be.
Yeah.
So this would be one of my biggest plants that I use is Italian Val, and I happen to have a strain that grows very well in my hard water, and it doesn't take a lot of light, but it will just cover a tank. I use a lot of Italian Val. I also use a lot of hornwort. Both of those are very good at taking excess nitrogen and other excess nutrients out of the water. And of course, if you're feeding your fish, and you've got a lot of fish in there, the fish food that you feed them is actually fertilizing your plants as well, at least for the nitrogen end of it. So they do a good job of keeping the nitrates and nitrites down in the plant or in the tank. In a lot of the cichlid tanks, such as some of the Tanganyikan tanks, this is one that's been set up for a long time. It had a colony of Neolamprologus multifasciatus, or the little shelly in one corner. It still has a couple of spawning groups of Neolamprologus burchardi. It's got some lelupis. It also, notice it has some plecos, and it has some, every once in a while you'll see a Synodontis peticola.
Yeah, there they
show
go.
up.
Very nice.
Not nearly as many
What are
plants in
these darker ones here?
there are those are some young trophies that I'm growing
Okay.
up. These are for some reason a little bit shy, so they stay hidden away. But those will end up being 4 and 5 inch fish.
And these are.
The Cyphochromis leptosoma.
And these are.
And those are the Neolamprologus burchardi,
Okay.
or daffodil. Well, these are not the daffodils. These are the Princess of Burundi or fairy cichlid. And if you look down in that corner, back behind that pleco, you probably see some of their fry down there. The thing that's neat about a lot of the Neolamprologus, particularly the burchardi, the daffodil group, is they actually colony spawn. And by that I mean that the adults will lay the eggs will hatch, and then the fry from the previous two or three spawns will stay around and protect the younger fry, while the adults can go off and forage. So you actually will end up with a cloud down there of the several, I wouldn't call them generations, but several spawns at different sizes, all raising the new fry together, which is one of the neat things about some of the Tanganyikan fish. So Tanganyikans have egg scatterers, they have mouth brooders, they have many different types of reproduction. Unlike a high percentage of the Malawan cichlids, they're not all mouth breeders, so which really makes them interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
You can see over here is another Tanganyikan tank, and here's some more of the cryptocrine Aponychidifolia.
Growing crazy.
This
How big of a tank is this? So they know?
This is about a 125.
125 long.
Yeah, it's 6 foot long. I haven't measured it. It could actually be a 135, but
Okay.
notice it's got a pretty strong colony of plecos in it. The other thing is you'll notice some of the young fry. Oops, there are. He went back behind the pot. There are some Gelitochromis. And when I first got them, they were called Gelitochromis regani capilli yellow, but that has since been renamed. They're now called Gelitochromis marksmithii as a new species. And so they don't get a lot bigger than what you see there, not like the normal regani that will get to be 5 inches or so. Of course, they like the little caves, and they'll spawn in there very readily. They're all hiding. When you get close to the tank, I've got some Tropheus morii in there, sunsets, which are about 5 inches. You can see some back there. They are a mouth brooder. They're also an algae eater. So they're very good around other fry. They don't bother many of the species of fry because they're not normally predatory. They are mouth brooders, and so they've actually spawned, and I've got some fry of those swimming around in the tank as well.
Very cool.
So live bears, Tanganyikans, primarily.
All right. And this is where he gives his presentations.
This tank is to be it was my original 125 my wife bought me several years ago. And it's to be a highlight tank, but you see that it's so grown shut that the plants on top keep it pretty much shaded out down below. Now, actually, those are LEDs. If you look up above, you'll see that I have 3 LED strips, each of which is about 6,000 lumens, so there's about 18,000 lumens over that tank. And I can actually take this water lettuce and get it to bloom indoors. The key to blooming water lettuce indoors is it has to have sufficient size, so I can get it above 4 inches across with these highlights. The other thing is water lettuce is triggered to bloom when the day length starts to decrease. So if you're keeping it in the ponds, you'll never see it blooming until after the 1st of August, generally about the 10th to the 15th, when the day length is coming down from about 14 down below 12. And so by putting the day length longer here and then growing the plants and then turning it back to 10 or 12, it'll immediately start to bloom, and so I'll get a lot of blooms in here.
That's really cool. Yeah, I've never heard of it blooming before.
But it's a photoperiod trigger. It's not temperature. The size does have a lot to do with it.
You got the substrate banked up back there? Oh, you got Farwella cats in here too.
Those are the Rhinolorcara adapapo. So
look at
those
that.
would be the mouth-brooding catfish.
Yeah, it's got the little thread on the tail.
Yeah, but if you notice, he has a very wide set of barbels across from the mouth.
Yeah.
And the male will sit on the eggs on the bottom and protect them that way. So it's one of the mouth-brooding catfishes.
That's pretty neat.
That's a community tank. It's got a few tetras.
So is this the same one? Is that supposed to be there, or did
that's
they breed out?
No, that's the red lizard.
Okay.
That would be Eigenmani. No, this is I'm sorry. This one is Loricarina adapapo, and that one's Rhinolorcara Eigenmani.
Okay. Look at this female cherry barb. She's huge. Got angels in there, jungle val, all kinds of stuff. Oh, there's lots of gouramis in there.
There's 3 pearl gouramis.
3?
Pearl gouramis are probably my favorite gourami.
They're pretty neat.
One thing I noticed, if you notice, there are a few cichlids, there are some Bolivian rams, and there are also some crebensis in there. And one thing I noticed several years ago is with the dwarf gouramis, when I was feeding all the fish, and they would all come up to the top and feed at the same place, a dwarf gourami would come along and just bump them really hard. You hear it go pop from clear across the room, and they were actually killing some of the fish, which is kind of odd.
Really? That's crazy. Yeah.
This is a holding tank that's going to have it's basically empty right now.
Emerald eyes, I always like those.
Yeah.
And this tank, this is lively.
That's a species that at one time was thought to be extinct in the wild. And there's a little town of Tecatlan in Mexico. They finally found them in a water park at the north end of the Rio Amica River, and were able to bring them back to the hobby back in the late 70s. And they have been kept in the hobby now, reintroduced into the wild. Many people, they've started to show up a lot across the Midwest. It's the Amica splendens, butterfly gadiid, or butterfly split fin. Notice the yellow on the tail. Those are the males. They will hold their own. They can be relatively aggressive in a tank. They'll hold their own with cichlids. They also have relatively large fry. The fry, when they're first born, and in this case that would be a proper term, are about 3/4 of an inch long.
Wow.
One of the reasons I like the gadiids is, and as opposed to the pasilids or the guppy group, is the gadiids are actually a little more like humans in the way they develop their young. The egg is fertilized internally, and then as it develops inside the female, it actually grows a trophonema, which would be like the human placenta. And so it takes on nutrients from the bloodstream of the female, and the egg will grow inside as it develops. And as soon after they're born, sometimes you can find a fry that will have the trophonema still attached, so it would be like a baby with a placenta.
Carrying its placenta around.
So these would be called viviparous. In other words, completely live-bearing. Guppies and many of the other pasilids would be called oviviparous, which means they carry the eggs internally, and the eggs develop internally, but they don't grow. They just develop, and then when they're fully developed, then they're spawned and dropped as developed fry. But they don't feed the fry while they're internal. In this case, the Gadiids, the species of Gadiids, do feed the fry.
That's wild.
Internally.
That is wild.
Which makes them kind of interesting. And if you're talking birds and bees, you probably need a few with your kids. You probably need a few guppies around to show some of the anatomical issues. But then the Gadiids also will carry it a little further, and you can talk about the baby and the placenta.
That's wild. Then you got a whole nother fish room back here too, don't you?
Yeah,
It's never ending.
You've seen the big tanks, but actually some of my live bearers I keep back here as species tanks. I went to a large auction a while back, and unfortunately some of my tanks are being used as holding tanks right now.
You got a lot of neat stuff in here.
But you were talking about the Neoheterandria elegans,
Yes.
the tiger teddy. Here's some of those now. Those are pretty much full size. So you can see, if anything, they would be about, as an adult, the male would be no more than 3/4 of an inch. The female would be about an inch. You'll see that this is one of my few tanks where I have a concession and have a heater. The Neoheterandria elegans are from the northern part of Colombia. They're relatively close to the sea level, and in that area, of course, that would be a tropical area. So the waters are quite a bit warmer than most of the apacillids that come out of Mexico, guppies and others. So they actually do best under a warmer temperature regime. And so I dropped a little betta heater in there that's preset at about 78, just to keep the temperature a little bit warmer. One thing you can see is, as we talked earlier, my tanks are kept a little cooler. I have heaters in essentially none of them. But when you come in here and you haven't changed water for a while, you'll see the water in this one is a little lower because the heated water evaporates faster.
Yep.
And so...
and you're talking about your tanks are a little cooler. That's like low 70s, right?
Yeah, low to mid 70s.
Okay, low to mid 70s.
In the winter, they will get down to low 70s. On occasion, they might get down to 68. And that's one of the reasons I also keep a lot of the Gadiids, because the Gadiids are from Mexico, but they're from the high elevations where temperatures are very cold. In fact, some of the Gadiids will live under ice.
That's crazy.
Those are one of the northern swordtails. That would be Zophophorus continens that you're looking at in there. They're one of the pygmy swords as well. Those are adults. The larger females in there are full size. Notice they also don't have much of a sword, but they've got the slender sword type shape.
These are pretty.
Yeah, I keep a few domestic guppies around. Those happen to be my wife's. She bought them at a guppy show one day, and so lately we've had several groups of guppies. Here's another temperate species. I don't know if you can see them or not, but this would be Nesteron decimaculatus. The decimaculatus says 10 spots. These would be from Uruguay, which would be at about the same south latitude that we're at here in Illinois north latitude. So they're a temperate fish. They would also like cooler temperatures, and they're also very small. I like them because they don't take anything special. The fry are very, very tiny, but the adult don't seem to bother them, so they work very well, particularly as a community tank.
Yeah, they're all over the place in there.
Let's see. Some of these are the white clouds I just brought in from outside. You can see they grew quite well outside. White clouds I like outdoors because they're a cold water fish from the White Cloud Mountain in China. And you can put them outside very early in the spring, even while you're getting a lot of frost. And they don't bother their fry, so first thing you know, they've kept the mosquitoes down, but you've got a full tub of white cloud fry outside.
And these guys are really neat over here too.
Yeah, that one's one that you don't see all that often. That is Balanosox belisarius, or the pike live bearer. It's a predator. It looks a lot like a half-beak, but that basically means it has a large mouth that it can open, and you'll see a few guppies swimming around in there. They will eat one of those guppies whole.
That's crazy. I wish they'd turn to the side so we could see them.
Yeah, they're pretty wary. They
oh, there's one.
You
in
notice
the very back.
Yeah, there's one right here. You'll also notice that I have a top on because they have a tendency to like to jump.
I could imagine that.
These are small. They will get to be 6 to 8 inches long as the females will as adults. The males will only be about 4. But you can imagine to grow them from here to there, they're going to eat a lot of guppies.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine. Very cool. Angelfish, platies, bumblebee, endlers. We got the least killifish in here, right?
Yep, there's a few of those in there.
Where'd you get this jar?
That jar comes from Sam's.
Okay.
I eat the cheese curls.
Okay. It makes for a great little tank.
Yeah, it's easy to drop a air stone in the bottom of it.
Yeah.
Keep it going. It will handle. I use it for some of the shrimp that I've just got a small number of. Now the Heterandria formosa that are in there are facilid. They're live bearers, a lot like the guppy, except one difference between them, and there are several species like this of the facilids. You'll notice that you don't see a lot of similar-sized fry. These, because of their small size, they have a different reproductive strategy in that they will produce several large eggs. So they're going to have large fry, but they only drop 1 or 2 a week. Where a guppy will have all of their whole litter, if you will, all at one time. But these will drop 1 or 2 a week. They're large fry, so over time they will produce quite a few fry, but they're relatively large than most other fish that size.
And I love how you use the hex bolt, stainless steel hex bolts for the air stones here. That's a nice little trick.
Yeah, the stainless steel is non-corrosive. Some of the regular steel will have chromium on them. You don't want to use that, but stainless steel is a different alloy, and so it's water safe and fish safe, and doesn't rust. So once you get it on there and it's heavy enough, it will hold even some of the smaller air stones on the bottom.
Very cool. I love this little tank you got over here. This is only, what did you say, 4 inches?
Yeah, it's a little over 4. It's maybe 5 inches tall. That would start out as a reptile tank.
Okay.
And you can actually take a 10. It's the same size as a 10, but just cut down. The fish that are in it would be Heterandria formosa. They would be just like this, but these are the ones in the short tank are the blonde type. That's a naturally occurring color type of the Heterandria, or the least killifish. These are also native fish to the U.S., by the way.
Interesting.
From the Carolinas all the way around through Louisiana to the Texas coast. So if you go to Florida, you can actually collect those in the wild. And I'm sure that some of these.
And I love this little dwarf set.
Yeah, it is. I've put it under high light. I've done all kinds of stuff to it, and I can't really get it any bigger than that.
It'd make a good carpeting plate.
It does a very good job that way. There's a concession to some of the Cubans. That is, you get some of the. That's the black chin livebearer. You were talking about the gonopodium on some of the facilities in the other room.
Yeah, these.
Look at the gonopodium on those. It will reach almost all the way.
About got me there. Went to put my hand there. I'm like, wait a second.
He's in it. You're the second guy that got that one.
That's funny.
Yeah. But notice the gonopodium on the males.
Where's he at? There he's hiding. Here comes the male. Here, little fella. Yeah, those are neat.
They would get to be about the size of guppies. Yeah. Not a lot of color. Black chin because they're black under the chin, and so if you get a really good strain, it'll run all the way back to the an axolotl. That's my grandson's axolotl.
Well, that's cool that you keep them for him.
Those right there are Faciliopsis prolifica. They're also from South America. They normally would have a little warmer temperature. The plant that you see that is taken over there is actually Italian val that's growing short. And the thing about these is when you go to catch them, there's no fish in there because they all bury themselves down in the forest.
Yeah. We got some Caradinia in here you've been keeping.
Yeah, we're trying. We've never kept very many Caradinia. My wife actually picked these up at an auction, and
they're in there somewhere.
We should try some of yours sometime.
Yeah.
They were hiding.
They are hiding, but they're in there. I swear I saw them earlier.
Most of what we keep would be the neocardidias, such as the Bloody Marys.
Yeah, there's a nice painted fire red Bloody Mary.
The thing I like about the Bloody Mary is not only is the carapace red, but the meat inside is also red, which is why. So you get, and then we just picked up some Blue Dreams, which are, and if you take the Blue Dreams or take one of the blacks and cross them with the Bloody Mary, you will get Black Rose, which has the black or blue carapace, but then the meat inside will be red, which is where the rose color comes from. So
I've actually gotten a tricolor Neo to come out of those before,
oh, really?
Where it's red, black, and blue in 3 different sections. It's pretty wild. Yeah.
So it's almost got some really in it.
Sort of, but just different colors. Yeah.
That is one that I'm desperately trying to save. That's another pygmy swordtail. It comes from about the same place in northern Mexico as the ones that we looked at a while ago. This would be Xiphophorus pygmaeus. There's only 2. There's a male and a female.
There's a Placo having fun in that airline though.
Yeah, I'm not sure he's enjoying it quite so much now that he's in there. But,
right, I don't know where they're at.
Well, one of them normally stays back, see her right back along the side. In this back corner.
Oh, I see. Yeah, back there.
Yeah.
She's hiding.
There's a male and a female, and I let my colony get low, and if I lose them, they're extremely difficult to find in the hobby.
Are they?
Yeah.
Really rare.
This is a new Tanganyikan tank I'm starting. Notice it's got a Tropheus morii bimba, which will be its primary centerpiece. It's got several species of shellies. These that you see here would be Neolamprologus quadripunctatus. They use a relatively large shell. Normally the female will be the only one inside. There are also, you can see a pile of shells here with some Neolamprologus multifasciatus, which is the little striped shelly that most people have. The thing about these is you can actually keep a colony of Neolamprologus multifasciatus in a 10-gallon tank. It works better if you put a brick or something in the middle so that the ones on one end can't see the other end, but you'll actually break it up into more territories, but that works very well. And that's not the only species that's that size. If you look up in this upper right tank up here, you can see a colony of Neolamprologus similis that's in a 10-gallon tank. Now, if you look at those are almost identical to the Neolamprologus multifasciatus, except that the bands on these go in front of the gills. Notice how you have like 2 in front of the gills above the eye. You won't have that on the multifasciatus, so that's the thing that keeps these separate. You don't find nearly as many of these in the hobby. They're a little rare. I haven't had that issue, but some people have told me that they don't spawn for them nearly as often as the multifasciatus. So they're a little more difficult to raise.
Very neat.
So I have a few Tanganyikans, primarily livebearers. Most of my tanks have a species of livebearer in them. And I'll probably eventually put some swordtails or something in some of the Tanganyikan tanks too. But
those make pretty good dithers too, you think?
Yep. I know one very well-known fish keeper who keeps large cichlids. Maybe you've heard of Rusty Wessel in Louisville, in his fish house. He has 8-foot tanks with large cichlids in it, and that's where he raises his swordtails. And he'll have hundreds of swordtails, and they'll just have a colony going in the tank with red terrors or any other of the, particularly some of the South American species that he keeps. So,
very cool.
Fish keeping is very interesting. There's a lot of things to look at. You learn something every day. Lighting has completely changed over the last few years. The plants that are becoming, I keep hunting for new plants that work very well. And there's always something interesting going on.
That's what I love about this hobby. You can do it for years and years and years, and there's always something new or something else to do.
Yep.
And these guys are pretty cool over here.
Yeah, another thing I like to keep are some of the rarer species. I like the small species. And what you're looking at there are called the 4-spot Merry Widow. So it's Phalictes quadripunctatus. They're actually from Costa Rica. But the four-spot Merry Widow does not reproduce very rapidly, and it's actually endangered in the wild. You can see where the four spots are very prominent. It's also considered a cares fish. And a cares fish is one that a lot of hobbyists will keep specifically because if they go extinct in the wild, there is a repository to bring other fish from and reintroduce. So I have trouble. Charlie Grimes at Indianapolis and I trade back and forth. Like I said, they don't reproduce quite as well as some of the other facilids. This is a facilid. It's one of the few facilids, in other words, in the guppy, swordtail, and molly family, that are considered to be cares fish. And every once in a while, his colony will get low, and I'll take him some, or my colony will get low, and he'll bring me some, just to keep this species going and keep it spread out. Another small fish that folks notice, these are in 10-gallon tanks. Here's a species of gadiid, and most of the gadiids would be considered cares fish or endangered in the wild because they're in a very limited habitat in Mexico that is having a lot of human habitation encroaching, and specifically swordtails, mollies, and other fish are being put in there that wipe out their habitat. This is Scyphia multipunctata. The multipunctata stands for the spots on the side of the male. Notice they have a fairly large flowing dorsal fin, and particularly the males, as they age, will get a lot of spots to where they can almost be black and orange all over. There's a couple in there that have more spots. I find these to be fairly prolific, very easy to raise, plus they don't get very large. The largest one in there is no more than about 2 inches long, and that would be some of the larger females.
Very cool.
And that's a cares fish as well. So
yeah, I like
if you keep either of those two species, you're keeping something that's endangered in the wild, and people will keep those colonies going for decades just to make sure that those fish don't get lost. Here's my favorite of the gadiids. It's also a cares fish, and they're difficult to see here. Particularly, this one is Neotoca bilineata. And if you look at some of the males, I don't know if you can see the one down in there. Notice they have black fins. Here's a nice big male.
Yeah, there's a nice one showing off.
So they've got quite a bit of color. Those are adults, and so they're about the size of a guppy. Maybe a little smaller than many of the guppies as adults. So they're easy to keep. They're not highly prolific. The other thing about both these species of gadiids is they eat a lot of algae, so they're not really carnivorous, which means that they're not going to act as predators on other fish. If anything, they're going to be predated by other fish, which means you may have to keep them separate. But I like them because I can keep a lot of them in a tank. They do reproduce relatively slowly, but as a cares fish, this is another one that has got some color and is really interesting to keep.
Yeah, those are nice.
So a lot of the fish that I have, starting out with the Amica splendids that we talked about earlier, that tank that has probably 100 or more in it, the 40-gallon tank, I started keeping because they were endangered in the wild, and I wanted to make sure that there was a repository of fish that could go back into the wild at some point.
Well, that's great. We got people like you doing that. Like, CARES program is such a great program. And if you guys haven't checked out the CARES program, they do have a website that you can get on and learn a lot more information too.
It's on the California Academy of Sciences website.
All right, cool. All right, so there you have it. There's the second part to Chuck Bremer's fish room tour. I hope you guys enjoyed that. And you do a lot of work for clubs.
Yeah, one of the good ways of learning, of course, is through videos. But if you need somebody live, working with one of the clubs, finding out, getting to know them, there's always a lot of people around that have got some long-term experience with fish keeping. And as you know, some of the older ones are not so conversant with YouTube and some of that.
Right.
Pick their brains too, because they've got a lifetime of information.
Lots of hidden knowledge, that's for sure. And you can get some of the greatest fish that you may never see anywhere.
That's right.
So if you do got a local club, check it out. If it's a couple hour drive, hey, may not hurt to go check us auction or swap out. But yes, I hope you guys enjoyed this fish room. There's a lot going on in here. And till next time, everybody, Oh, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe too. All right, till next time, everybody. Peace.
Have a good day.